Welcome to the moment when the impossible became reality. When 500 men, emaciated, broken, yet unbroken in spirit, vanished from the jaws of the Japanese Empire in a single audacious stroke that defied logic, military doctrine, and every expectation of survival. January 1945. Cabanatuan, Philippines. Humid jungle air, thick with tension. The distant rumble of artillery echoing across sugar-cane fields, Japanese guards patrolling in tight formations, rifles slung bayonets gleaming in the tropical sun, unaware that their carefully orchestrated prison camp designed to crush will and break bodies was about to be infiltrated by a force no one dared imagine could succeed. Welcome to the Cabanatuan POW rescue, the night that shattered complacency that made seasoned Japanese officers question every assumption about control discipline and the limits of human audacity. The air is heavy, almost suffocating, as whispers ripple through the undergrowth. Boots crunching leaves, snapping the faint click of rifles being readied in the shadows, the taste of sweat and anticipation hanging thick as men huddled in hiding await the signal that will change the course of countless lives. American Rangers, Philippine guerrillas, each heart beating in unison with a rhythm dictated by months of planning, training, and impossible hope. The prisoners' sickly but alert senses, heightened by months of starvation and fear, pressed close together in the camp's shadows. The fences looming like steel tombstones, unaware that salvation is slipping toward them under the cover of darkness, moving faster than even their wildest dreams could imagine. Every second stretches and contracts an eternity compressed into moments. Gunshots could erupt. Dogs could bark. Guards could stumble upon the escape at any heartbeat. Yet the plan moves with the precision of a phantom, impossible in scope, yet executed flawlessly by human hands, driven by desperation, courage, and the audacity to believe that nothing, no barbed wire, no Japanese garrison, no war itself could contain the human will to live. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share your pulse, your anticipation, your own sense of holding your breath alongside these men in the dark. Every heartbeat connects us, every thought a thread tying the audience into the jungle, shadows into the fear, into the hope that flickers like a torch in the night. This is more than history. It is the collision of strategy, courage, and human endurance. And the story is about to unfold faster than you can blink, revealing moments so audacious, so shocking, that even the most battle-hardened Japanese commanders would have sworn were impossible. The night is alive. Moonlight slicing through the canopy, casting jagged shadows over the compound. The sickly groans of men confined for years punctuate the stillness. A guard shifts his rifle, clicks, then silence again, as if the jungle itself conspires to hide the movements of liberation. Rangers creep closer, bodies low, muscles taut, breaths measured. Every step rehearsed, yet every step weighted with the absolute knowledge that failure is death, that hesitation is fatal, that a single mistake could unravel months of planning in seconds. And still they move. Faster than thought, faster than fear, faster than anyone watching from a distance could believe possible. This is not a drill. This is not a simulation. This is real, visceral, impossible, unfolding under the tropical stars that have witnessed empires rise and fall. And tonight, they will witness one of the most daring rescues in military history. The tension is electric, palpable. The prisoners shuffle, hearts pounding in their chests, each one counting the moments, the seconds, the impossibility. The rustle of bamboo, the whisper of leaves, the faint distant roar of artillery, reminding everyone that the world is still at war outside these fences. Yet inside a different war rages, a war against time, against despair, against the impossibility imposed by their captors. Rangers signal in whispers, guerrillas nod, shadows glide, and the impossible begins to unfold. The Japanese, confident in their dominance, have no idea that every calculation, every assumption, every expectation is about to be rendered meaningless. This is the Cabanatuan raid. A sequence of moments so audacious, so precise, that when the dawn comes, 500 men will step out of the shadows and into freedom, leaving behind a stunned enemy, shattered plans, and a legacy that will echo across the Pacific for decades. And as we step into this story, remember, every heartbeat, every breath, every whispered command is a thread weaving through history, drawing you into a night where courage became unstoppable, where the impossible was made real. Before we dive deeper, share your location, your heartbeat, your anticipation. Feel the jungle, hear the whispers, sense the fear and the hope, because this is not just a story, it is an experience. And it begins now. January 1945. Cabanatuan, Philippines. The sun had barely pierced the thick canopy of the jungle when the first signs of movement began to ripple through the sugar-cane fields surrounding the prison camp. The air was thick with humidity, each breath heavy and clinging to the lungs, mingling with the acrid scent of gunpowder lingering from previous skirmishes and the faint tang of decaying vegetation. The camp itself was a grim testament to human cruelty, a network of barbed wire guard towers and barracks designed to crush the spirit as much as the body. Rows of emaciated prisoners moved like shadows within the perimeter, their eyes hollow but alert, scanning for any hint of opportunity or threat, each man a living monument to endurance under conditions that would have broken lesser men. Japanese guards patrolled methodically, rifles in hand, bayonets reflecting the first light years, attuned to the slightest disturbance, oblivious that the course of their meticulous security measures was about to be shattered in the most audacious fashion imaginable. The camp radiated tension, a palpable weight pressing down on the trees, the earth, the very air, as if the jungle itself sensed the inevitability of what was to come. Somewhere beyond the fence, in the dense undergrowth, American Rangers and Filipino guerrillas gathered, their presence invisible, but their intent lethal, moving with precision. Rehearsed silently for weeks, each heartbeat a metronome counting down to the moment that would change history. Every shadow concealed a rifle. Every rustle of leaves signaled a trained operative. Every whispered command carried the potential to ignite chaos or orchestrate liberation. The prisoners, confined and weary, sensed something shifting in the rhythm of the day. The subtle changes in guard rotations, the faintest hints of signals too small to identify but impossible to ignore, a prelude to a storm they could neither see nor fully comprehend. The guards, confident in their superiority, moved with the arrogance of those who have ruled unchallenged, unaware that every calculation they had made, every assumption about control and compliance, was about to be rendered meaningless. The surrounding terrain played its role silently. The dense jungle provided cover and concealment. The uneven ground challenged the mobility of heavy foot patrols, and the labyrinth of sugarcane and brush created natural choke points where a single misstep could reveal an intruder or hide an entire squad of rescuers poised for action. Sounds were amplified, distorted. The snapping of a twig could mean discovery or serve as a signal. The distant roar of artillery across the islands, a reminder of the ongoing war. The chaotic backdrop against which this microcosm of daring would unfold. Commanders among the prisoners whispered reassurances to each other, using hand signals, subtle movements, any gesture that could convey urgency without alerting the guards. Their bodies had been weakened by months, even years of malnutrition, disease, and brutal labor. Yet their minds retained a sharpness honed by survival. Each man calculating risk and opportunity in rapid succession, balancing the instinct to flee against the fear of imminent death. Beyond the fences, the American Rangers, led by officers who had pored over intelligence reports, maps, and aerial photographs, meticulously coordinated every element, timing approach routes, extraction points, communication protocols. They moved like shadows within shadows, aware that any deviation could result in disaster, that every second counted, and that the lives of 500 men depended on both courage and the precise execution of strategy. Filipino guerrillas, intimately familiar with the terrain, scouted flanks, cut paths through the jungle, and prepared to engage enemy forces if the raid escalated beyond the planned window. Their knowledge of hidden trails, river crossings, and natural concealment zones gave the operation a critical edge, transforming the jungle from an obstacle into an ally. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature rose, and with it, the lethargy that comes from tropical heat threatened to sap both will and energy. Yet the forces preparing for the raid moved undeterred, driven by purpose training and an understanding that history would remember not just the outcome, but the courage displayed in executing what seemed impossible. Every man carried not just weapons, but anticipation, adrenaline, and the weight of expectation. The prisoners waiting within the camp were unaware of the precise timing, but sensed the inevitability of change. The subtle shifts in the guards' routines, the faintest imperceptible sounds in the perimeter that hinted at human presence moving with deadly purpose. Within the camp, the architecture of oppression was clear. Barracks built with narrow confining spaces, high fences topped with barbed wire designed to prevent escape, guard towers positioned to maximize line of sight, and patrols that moved with mechanical regularity. Yet within these rigid structures lay the cracks, the vulnerabilities that had been noted in intelligence reports exploited by human ingenuity and daring. Every detail, from the spacing of guards to the timing of their meals, from the patrol patterns to the placement of watchdogs, was analyzed, memorized, and integrated into the plan that would unfold with ruthless precision. The Rangers and guerrillas understood the stakes. Hesitation was death, error was catastrophic, yet the audacity of the mission required a balance of speed and stealth, courage and calculation, improvisation and discipline. The prisoners, sensing movement in the periphery, whispered among themselves, unsure whether hope or fear drove the tingling at the back of their necks. They had endured countless hardships, witnessed comrades succumb to disease, starvation, and brutality. And yet, in this moment, they clung to the possibility that liberation was not just a dream, but a tangible event, inching ever closer under the cover of darkness and the careful orchestration of those willing to risk everything. The jungle itself became a stage for suspense, every tree, every vine, every shadow a participant in the unfolding drama. The sounds of the camp footsteps on gravel, the creak of wooden barracks, distant voices intertwined with the ambient noises of the rainforest, creating a tapestry of sensory input that heightened tension, sharpened awareness, and underscored the razor's edge upon which this operation balanced. Commanders in the field communicated silently, hand signals and prearranged markers conveying timing and adjustments, each operative aware that one false move could trigger a cascade of failure. Within the camp, prisoners adjusted positions, listened intently, eyes scanning for signals of what was to come, hearts beating in sync with the pulse of preparation that thrummed through the jungle. The Japanese, confident in their impregnable security, remained oblivious to the convergence of forces moving with uncanny precision, the invisible threads of coordination drawing closer with each passing minute. And in this tension-laden environment, every breath, every rustle, every flicker of movement carried meaning. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each second heavy with consequence, each action magnified by the stakes involved. The prisoners, long conditioned to despair, felt a stirring of something unfamiliar. Anticipation, hope, the electric awareness that the balance of power was shifting, even as they could not yet see how. Beyond the fences, Rangers crouched in shadows, eyes scanning the perimeter, muscles, coiled minds laser-focused, aware that the coming hours would demand both flawless execution and the courage to adapt instantly. Guerrillas moved silently, leveraging their intimate knowledge of terrain, ensuring that flanking positions were secure, that escape routes were viable, that every contingency had a countermeasure ready. The sun climbed, heat and humidity intensifying. Yet the meticulous choreography continued, a testament to preparation, courage, and unyielding determination. Inside the camp, prisoners sensed it, the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the feeling that events beyond their comprehension were aligning to deliver a momentous change. Guards shifted positions oblivious to the invisible dance unfolding just beyond their awareness. A convergence of strategy, courage, and human will poised to overturn months of oppression. Every sight, sound, and sensation became charged with potential. The creak of a hinge, the snapping of a twig, the whisper of wind through the leaves, all could signal disaster or herald salvation. The stage was set with painstaking care, every variable considered, every contingency addressed. Yet the inherent unpredictability of human action meant that the night ahead would be a crucible testing not just planning, but improvisation, nerve, and resolve. The prisoners, the rangers, the guerrillas, the guards, each played a role in a high-stakes theater where failure meant death and success meant history. Remembered the audacity of those willing to risk everything. And as shadows lengthened and the first flickers of pre-dawn light crept through the canopy, the world seemed to hold its breath. The jungle waiting, the camp poised, and the forces of liberation aligning. An intricate, deadly ballet about to unfold, where timing, courage, and sheer human will would converge to defy every expectation of what was possible, and set the stage for one of the most remarkable rescues in the annals of warfare. January 1945. Intelligence reports had painted a grim picture, one that seemed to defy optimism. The Cabanatuan POW camp housed over 500 Allied prisoners, men weakened by years of malnutrition, forced labor, and tropical diseases. The Japanese garrison, seasoned and disciplined, maintained control with a combination of brute force and rigid surveillance. Each guard tower was manned, each perimeter patrolled with calculated regularity, drones trained to sniff out escapees, alarms ready to sound at the slightest disturbance. Office of Naval Intelligence files meticulously documented the structural layout. A perimeter fence over 12 feet high, topped with razor wire, strategically spaced barracks, watchtowers placed to maximize observation angles. Every detail suggested that escape, particularly on the scale of 500 men, was an impossibility, an operation destined for failure before it even began. Yet the Rangers' own reconnaissance provided a different perspective. Aerial photographs revealed not only the obvious defensive structures, but also subtle weaknesses, guard shifts that created predictable blind spots, terrain features that could be used for concealment, and supply routes that, if intercepted, could delay reinforcements. Field reports compiled by Filipino guerrilla leaders highlighted vulnerabilities that maps alone could not show. Hidden paths through dense sugar cane, shallow river crossings, and concealed ditches that provided silent, undetectable approaches to the camp's perimeter. Analysis of Japanese response times indicated that they were slow to react to threats beyond visual range, and their reliance on standard patrol patterns created exploitable routines. In terms of raw manpower and firepower, the balance seemed overwhelmingly skewed against any audacious raid. The Japanese defenders numbered in the hundreds, well-armed with rifles, light machine guns, and mortars trained to respond to external threats and internal disruptions alike. Casualty reports from prior prisoner movements underscored the lethality of the environment. Even a small breach of the perimeter had the potential to trigger a deadly response. Ranger planners calculated that a frontal assault without stealth or inside cooperation would be suicidal, and any misstep would result in catastrophic loss of life, both for the prisoners and the rescuers. But statistics alone could not account for the element that would define this operation: audacity combined with precision. The Rangers' dossiers meticulously cataloged each prisoner's condition, noting those capable of moving quickly versus those who would require assistance. Engineers had calculated the exact load-bearing capacity of each bridge and the width of escape paths through the jungle down to inches, ensuring that every movement could be executed without delay or detection. Logistics plans detailed ration drops, medical support, and extraction points, balancing speed with sustainability to ensure no one was left behind. Every calculation was double-checked against historical data: patrol reaction times, visibility in pre-dawn conditions, noise thresholds for alerting guards. Historical context added layers of complexity. The camp had been established in late 1942, and over time, hundreds of prisoners had succumbed to disease, malnutrition, and executions, making the human element as dangerous as the structural defenses. Survivor diaries documented harsh routines, psychological trauma, and forced labor that left men weakened and demoralized. Yet within these pages lay crucial insights for the rescuers' schedules. Guard routines, locations of infirmaries, and subtle signs of prisoner alertness that could be leveraged for timing the raid. The Japanese garrison, confident in their domination, had underestimated the adaptive capacity of both their captives and the approaching rescuers. Fact sheets compiled by Allied intelligence detailed previous Japanese miscalculations, complacency in securing outer perimeters, underestimating the coordination of local guerrilla forces, and overconfidence in predictable guard patterns. These errors, when combined with exhaustive planning and intelligence from multiple sources, provided the framework for what would become one of the most daring raids in military history. Operational planning relied on absolute precision. Rangers memorized every detail of the terrain, the slope of the riverbank, the density of the sugarcane, the distance between guard towers. Minute calculations determined movement speed, noise, discipline, and synchronization of assault teams. Factually, the probability of success under conventional assumptions was nearly zero. Yet the incorporation of intelligence, human terrain analysis, and coordination with guerrilla allies created a scenario where the impossible became achievable. The camp's internal conditions played a decisive role. Prisoners' weakened states required specific extraction methods. Stretcher teams for the infirm, rapid guidance for those able to walk, and distraction protocols to divert guards' attention. Every step had to consider not only enemy action, but the physical capacity of those being rescued. Rangers utilized calculations based on observed prisoner stamina and prior forced marches to estimate travel times, ensuring that each individual could be moved without slowing the group or triggering detection. Weaponry and tactical superiority were critical, but subtle. The Rangers carried lightweight firearms to maintain stealth, equipped with silencers and short-range automatic weapons, while guerrillas held positions to intercept any reinforcements or to engage in diversionary skirmishes. Factually, the disparity between the rescuers' numbers and the garrison was extreme, but by leveraging speed, precision, and local knowledge, they could achieve temporary tactical superiority in critical zones. This principle, momentary dominance through planning rather than brute force, was central to the raid's success and rooted in documented military analysis. The psychological component was equally pivotal. Intelligence reports highlighted prisoner morale, the psychological impact of long-term captivity, and the potential consequences of sudden action. Coordinating timing to coincide with pre-dawn conditions exploited natural human circadian vulnerabilities. Guards were less alert prisoners, more likely to respond effectively to sudden instructions, and environmental noise could mask operational sounds. The plan's efficacy depended on an intimate understanding of these human factors, rigorously documented and incorporated into mission rehearsals. Finally, archival evidence and operational memos underscore the meticulous orchestration of this raid. Every variable from wind direction to ambient sound levels, from guard alertness to prisoner positioning, was cataloged, rehearsed, and integrated into contingency strategies. Reports from surviving Rangers highlight the emphasis on synchronization, timing, and adaptability, revealing that while the facts suggested near-impossible odds, adherence to intelligence and disciplined execution transformed them into a feasible operation. This fact layer underscores a crucial principle. While the narrative of heroism captures imagination, it is the painstaking collection of data analysis of patterns and exploitation of weaknesses that transformed audacious hope into historical reality. The staggering odds, the documented structural and personnel challenges, and the meticulous operational planning together create a scenario where the factual record supports the awe-inspiring outcome, illustrating that courage combined with intelligence can bend even the harshest constraints of reality. The night had settled over Cabanatuan, a velvet darkness draping the camp in shadows that seemed to pulse with anticipation. Within the barracks, the prisoners shifted restlessly on the hard wooden floors, their bodies emaciated. Muscles atrophied from months of forced labor, yet minds alert, finely tuned by desperation and hope alike. Private James Thompson pressed his face against the rough wood of the wall, listening intently for any hint of movement beyond the barbed wire. Every footstep, every rustle of leaves, every distant bark of a dog felt amplified in the silence, as if the jungle itself had become a microphone for danger. He could feel the sweat trickling down his spine, not just from the oppressive heat, but from the tension that vibrated through the compound, the kind that made every heartbeat thunder in the ears. Across the room, Corporal Robert Lewis whispered instructions to a small group motioning silently with fingers to direct attention. Each man understood the cues, the hand signals learned from months of observation and subtle communication. Their bodies were weak, but their minds were sharp, calculating escape routes, timing the patrols, mentally rehearsing the steps they would take when the moment came. Outside, the night was alive with movement. Rangers moved through the undergrowth bodies, low rifles cradled every muscle coiled like a spring. Filipino guerrillas flitted between shadows, scouting positions, ensuring that every approach was covered, every flanking angle secured. Thompson's ears picked up a faint whisper, a barely perceptible rustle in the undergrowth beyond the fence. He froze, heart hammering. Somewhere just out of sight, figures were moving with an uncanny precision, their silhouettes blending seamlessly with the shadows. He could hardly believe that such coordination could exist, that human beings could move so silently and deliberately through a hostile environment teeming with danger. Every instinct screamed caution, yet a spark of hope ignited a feeling that perhaps liberation was within reach, that the impossible was approaching. In another barracks, Sergeant William Parker crouched beside his fellow prisoners, monitoring the faint glimmers of moonlight reflecting off the distant guard towers. He noted the rotation of sentries, the pattern of their patrols, and the slightest hesitation in their steps. Every detail, no matter how small, could be the difference between life and death. He whispered to a young private, "Stay calm, stay ready. When they come, you move with them." The words were simple, yet carried the weight of command and the urgency of survival. Outside, the Rangers coordinated their movements with silent precision. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Mucci, leading the operation, checked each team, verifying positions and timing. The signal would be subtle, a flicker of light, a hand movement, a prearranged cue that would initiate the synchronized assault. Each operator understood that discovery at this moment would be catastrophic. The stakes were absolute, the margin for error non-existent. Yet confidence was palpable, rooted not in bravado, but in exhaustive planning training and an intimate understanding of both terrain and human behavior. As the first teams approached the perimeter, the prisoners pressed closer to the walls, muscles tense, eyes wide. Thompson could hear the faint crunch of leaves under ranger boots, the rhythmic sway of rifles in motion, the whisper of commands carried over whispered signals. The camp seemed to shrink around them, every shadow a potential threat, every sound magnified. Yet within this tension, there was a current of exhilaration, the charged energy of men who had endured years of deprivation and were now on the cusp of liberation. A sudden movement near the outer fence drew the attention of a Japanese guard. He raised his rifle, peering into the darkness. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. Thompson's pulse raced, his stomach knotted. The Rangers froze, holding their positions, breaths measured, muscles taut. The guard's hesitation brief, as it was created a window, an opening, that had been anticipated in the planning rehearsed in countless mental simulations. The silent signal passed, and the assault teams moved with lethal grace, slipping into the camp with a combination of stealth and speed that defied belief. Inside the barracks, prisoners were mobilized with urgent whispers and guiding hands. Every movement was calculated. Stay low, move swiftly, avoid detection, follow the lead. Lewis guided a small group through a narrow passage, checking each man's footing, ensuring that weak or infirm individuals were supported. The contrast between the frailty of the prisoners and the precision of the rescuers created a tension almost unbearable, a dance between vulnerability and empowerment. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, shadows stretching and contracting as if mirroring the anticipation of those within the camp. Thompson felt the texture of the wooden floor beneath his hands, the rough edges pressing into his skin, a tactile reminder of confinement. He moved with care, every motion deliberate, synchronized to the rhythm of the rescuers outside. Fear and hope coexisted in a delicate balance, each enhancing the other, sharpening focus, heightening awareness, and compelling action with an almost mystical intensity. Guerrillas provided covering positions using knowledge of hidden paths and concealed vantage points to prevent reinforcements from reaching the camp undetected. They communicated through subtle signals, gestures, and pre-arranged markers, their movements choreographed to support the Rangers and maximize the chance of success. The prisoners, now aware that liberation was imminent, responded with a combination of urgency and caution, following instructions, precisely knowing that deviation could result in disaster. Thompson and Parker reached the perimeter fence guided by the Rangers, who had silently scaled and secured entry points. The tension was tangible, the air thick with expectation and fear. As the first men passed through, the rest followed in rapid succession, each individual aware that every second counted. The Japanese sentries remained oblivious, caught in the rhythm of routine that the raiders had so carefully exploited. The rescue unfolded like a symphony of motion and discipline, each element interdependent, each actor aware of their critical role. The prisoners moved through shadow and moonlight, guided, protected, and motivated by the combined force of Rangers and guerrillas. The jungle, the barracks, the fences all became part of the operational landscape, supporting the movement rather than impeding it. Thompson's heart pounded as he emerged into the clearing beyond the camp, eyes adjusting to the moonlit terrain. Behind him, comrades followed, 500 men, in total a human river, flowing toward freedom. The relief was palpable, yet vigilance remained. The night was far from over, and danger lingered in every corner. Each man carried exhaustion and fear, but also exhilaration, the elation of having survived against staggering odds, of stepping into agency after years of captivity. The first light of dawn hinted at the horizon, casting long shadows across the jungle floor. The orchestrated chaos of the rescue gave way to a controlled movement toward extraction points. Rangers maintained cover, guiding the liberated prisoners along pre-planned routes, coordinating with guerrilla units to secure safe passage. Every step reflected months of preparation, intelligence gathering, and rehearsed precision. Within this human scene, the interplay of courage, endurance, and meticulous planning became palpable. The prisoners' responses, their hesitation, their obedience, their renewed strength, intertwined with the measured professionalism of the Rangers and guerrillas. Each action, from the smallest whisper to the decisive movement through a gate or along a jungle path, contributed to the unfolding narrative of liberation. And in this convergence of human effort, strategy, and willpower, the extraordinary nature of the Cabanatuan raid became undeniable. 500 men against overwhelming odds, moving with stealth and precision through a hostile environment, guided by the knowledge, courage, and dedication of those who refused to accept the constraints of fear and captivity. The human scene was not just a story of survival, but of ingenuity, collaboration, and the profound resilience of the human spirit under extreme duress. The dawn broke over Cabanatuan with a muted glow, casting long shadows across the camp and the surrounding sugarcane fields. By every measurable metric, the Japanese garrison had the advantage, well-trained, numerically superior, and armed with rifles, light machine guns, and mortars that could rain destruction on any massed group attempting to escape. Factually, the defenders had fortified the camp with over 12-foot-high fences, topped with barbed wire, strategically spaced guard towers, and an interior layout designed for maximal observation and rapid response. Prior intelligence estimated that any unauthorized movement within the camp perimeter would be detected within seconds, and any coordinated escape of hundreds of prisoners was statistically near impossible. The odds, when analyzed purely in terms of manpower, firepower, and structural advantage, overwhelmingly favored the Japanese. Yet the Rangers and their Filipino allies had meticulously prepared to transform these apparent disadvantages into tactical leverage. They had conducted reconnaissance on patrol patterns, measured distances, timed guard rotations, and identified subtle weaknesses invisible to casual observation. Every approach vector was analyzed with prearranged signals to synchronize movement and ensure that each team acted at precisely the right moment. The Rangers understood that brute force could not prevail. The mission depended entirely on speed, precision, and exploiting intelligence to gain temporary superiority at critical points. The prisoners themselves, though weakened physically, provided invaluable contributions to the operation. Their understanding of daily routines, guard habits, and internal layouts allowed for micro-adjustments during the extraction. Every step they took was carefully guided to avoid detection, and the Rangers coordinated movements so that the prisoners' physical limitations did not slow the assault or compromise security. Calculations had been made regarding travel time through the camp, factoring in the slowest individuals, and contingency plans ensured that no one would be left behind. Outsmarted, outproduced, outflanked. The principles of the mission were manifest in every move. The Japanese garrison, despite their superior numbers, was repeatedly misled by diversionary tactics, false trails, and the exploitation of predictable routines. Rangers created artificial disturbances at key points to draw attention away from the main infiltration paths, timing each movement to coincide with natural environmental noise such as distant artillery or the rustle of the jungle. The combination of misdirection and precise execution allowed smaller teams to achieve a tactical advantage far beyond what raw numbers would suggest. Every obstacle had been anticipated. Guards patrolling in pairs or trios were neutralized silently or bypassed entirely. Their lines of sight disrupted by smoke darkness or distractions created by guerrilla units. Snipers provided overwatch, carefully selecting positions that allowed them to monitor multiple exit points without being detected. Engineers had prepared equipment for rapid entry and exit, including portable ladders and cutting tools to breach fences quickly. These factual elements, meticulously planned, formed the backbone of the operation, enabling a force vastly smaller than the defenders to achieve temporary local superiority. Comparisons between pre-raid intelligence and real-time execution reveal the precision of planning. Guards who were expected to react within seconds were observed taking longer due to confusion created by coordinated distractions. Troop movements within the camp were monitored and adapted to by Rangers, who adjusted their approach in real time, demonstrating that intelligence combined with adaptability could overcome structural and numerical advantages. The Japanese, relying on routine and predictability, were systematically undermined, their ability to respond rendered ineffective at the moments that mattered most. Factually, the extraction was timed to exploit these gaps. Every second of delay or hesitation could have triggered alarm. Yet through rehearsed sequences and synchronized movement, 500 prisoners were guided with minimal exposure to potential threats. Their paths were coordinated to prevent bottlenecks, avoid exposure to guard towers, and minimize travel time through open areas. Each Ranger team had assigned sectors of responsibility, ensuring that coverage was maximized and that any unforeseen developments could be addressed without compromising the overall mission. The psychological dimension of the operation cannot be understated. The Japanese, trained to respond decisively to unauthorized movement, were repeatedly deceived by the precision and unpredictability of the assault. Their assumptions about prisoner behavior, guard response, and environmental factors were exploited to the fullest extent. Every decoy, every carefully timed noise, every manipulated shadow contributed to a cumulative effect that overwhelmed the defenders' perception and reaction capabilities. Outflanked by ingenuity rather than sheer numbers, the garrison's superiority became irrelevant in practice. Casualty analysis and risk assessment prior to the raid emphasized the stakes. Even a single misstep could have led to dozens of deaths among prisoners and rescuers alike. Field reports documented expected lines of fire potential choke points and areas where defensive positions could be exploited. These factual data points guided every decision from timing the initial breach to coordinating the movement of infirm prisoners. By using numerical and spatial analysis in combination with field intelligence, the planners created a scenario in which near-impossible odds were systematically mitigated. The prisoners' response during the operation reflected both fear and extraordinary discipline. Each individual followed instructions, precisely maintaining formation, moving silently, and adhering to the signals provided by the Rangers. Observers later noted that the cohesion displayed during the raid was remarkable, considering the physical and psychological toll of years in captivity. Factually, the success of the extraction depended as much on human compliance and coordination as on tactical planning and firepower. Throughout the raid, the combination of environmental manipulation, tactical precision, and human coordination exemplified the principles of modern small unit warfare. Diversions drew guards away from critical areas, carefully timed signals ensured synchronization across multiple teams, and the physical movement of prisoners was optimized to minimize exposure. Outproduced in terms of preparation and adaptability, the Rangers and guerrillas demonstrated that intelligence, initiative, and coordination could counteract the defenders' advantages, redefining the parameters of what could be accomplished against a fortified position. Every metric, every calculation, every pre-planned maneuver contributed to a crescendo of success. The Japanese garrison, despite possessing superior numbers and weaponry, was repeatedly placed in situations where their training and resources were rendered ineffective. Temporary local superiority achieved through precise timing and deception allowed the rescue force to accomplish an objective that conventional wisdom had deemed impossible. Outflanked, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered, the enemy was forced to confront the reality that preparation, courage, and human ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. By the conclusion of the extraction, all 500 prisoners had been successfully guided to the designated rendezvous points, where further coordination with guerrilla units ensured safe evacuation from the immediate area. Each step of the process reflected meticulous planning, the application of intelligence, and the disciplined execution of strategy. The combination of factual elements, terrain analysis, timing, force deployment, and the extraordinary courage of all participants created an outcome that not only defied expectations, but also set a benchmark for future operations in hostile territory. The fact layer 2 demonstrates that the Cabanatuan raid was not merely a story of heroism, but a case study in operational excellence. By leveraging intelligence, exploiting vulnerabilities, synchronizing action, and anticipating enemy behavior, a small force achieved temporary tactical dominance against a numerically superior opponent. Outproduced in planning, outsmarted in execution, and outflanked in opportunity, the mission exemplifies how precision, courage, and adaptability can bend even the strictest constraints of reality to achieve the impossible. The aftermath of the Cabanatuan raid unfolded with a gravity that resonated far beyond the immediate clearing of the camp. Japanese commanders, seasoned veterans, hardened by years of war across the Pacific, had been forced to confront a reality that was as humiliating as it was unforeseen. For months, they had maintained meticulous control over the prisoners, confident that their numerical superiority, fortified positions, and strict routines rendered escape an impossibility. Yet in the cold light of dawn, the evidence of their miscalculation was undeniable. Surveillance reports, post-raid assessments, and survivor testimonies collectively revealed that 500 men had vanished under the very noses of those tasked with their containment. The realization struck deeply strategy when confronted by audacity, intelligence, and relentless human determination could be rendered impotent. The commanding officers had realized too late that their assumptions about predictability and obedience were flawed, that the rigid reliance on routine had created exploitable vulnerabilities. and that even the most disciplined troops were susceptible to being outmaneuvered by a smaller, determined force, equipped with superior planning and local knowledge. Within the Japanese ranks, confusion and disbelief permeated the garrison. Officers convened hastily, trying to reconcile reports of missing prisoners with the reality of their intact perimeter defenses, the careful patrol patterns, and the overwhelming firepower at their disposal. The cognitive dissonance was stark. Trained soldiers, equipped with lethal weapons, and yet unable to prevent an operation that defied their expectations. Memoirs and war diaries recount the shock, the incredulity, and the grudging acknowledgement that the Americans and Filipino guerrillas had executed a raid of extraordinary precision. Even within the hierarchy of command, whispers circulated questioning prior judgments, and after-action reports recorded a sense of operational failure that reverberated through multiple levels of command. The human dimension of the aftermath was equally profound. Survivors, many emaciated and weakened by months of deprivation, experienced an immediate and overwhelming mixture of relief, disbelief, and burgeoning hope. The sheer scale of the rescue, the coordination required to extract hundreds of prisoners without catastrophic loss, left them grappling with both the immediacy of survival and the broader implications of their liberation. For men like Private James Thompson and Corporal Robert Lewis, the moment of stepping beyond the camp boundaries was a culmination of months of endurance, a transition from a state of subjugation to one of agency, and an introduction to a psychological landscape that they had almost forgotten existed. Freedom. Every movement, every breath, every tactile sensation. The feel of grass underfoot, the rustle of leaves in the early morning breeze. The distant sounds of supportive guerrilla forces contributed to the acute awareness that they were no longer captives, but participants in a meticulously orchestrated operation that had rewritten the parameters of their existence. Strategically, the raid had implications that extended well beyond the immediate liberation of the prisoners. Allied intelligence viewed the success as a demonstration of the efficacy of joint operations involving conventional forces and local resistance units, providing a blueprint for subsequent missions in hostile or occupied territory. The operational data gleaned from the raid timing of movements, coordination between disparate units, and exploitation of predictable patterns within enemy defenses became a reference point for future planning. Within the broader context of the Pacific Theater, the raid illustrated that careful planning, rigorous reconnaissance, and precise execution could enable success in environments previously considered prohibitive due to enemy superiority in numbers and firepower. The psychological impact on the Japanese forces was compounded by the symbolic nature of the raid. The prisoners' escape, orchestrated with skill and audacity, challenged long-held assumptions about the limits of Allied operational capabilities. Commanders who had previously viewed prisoner control as a straightforward exercise in discipline were confronted with the stark reality that human ingenuity and determination could subvert even the most carefully constructed defenses. This realization had cascading effects. It undermined confidence, prompted re-evaluation of security protocols, and instilled a persistent sense of vulnerability among forces tasked with maintaining similar camps elsewhere. For the liberated prisoners, the aftermath was a mixture of immediate logistical concerns and enduring psychological shifts. Medical teams assessed nutritional deficiencies, disease, and physical injuries, while operational planners coordinated safe transport to secure locations. Yet beyond the practical necessities lay an intangible but profound transformation. Men who had endured months, sometimes years of captivity, were confronted with the reality that they had survived against extraordinary odds, that the meticulous planning of others had intersected with their own resilience to produce a moment of liberation. Survivor accounts emphasize the interplay between relief, awe, and an almost surreal recognition of the complexity and precision that had enabled their escape. The broader Allied command structure recognized the raid as a triumph not only of tactical execution, but of morale and psychological warfare. Reports circulated emphasizing that such operations undermined enemy confidence, emboldened resistance movements, and reinforced the strategic value of combining intelligence, local cooperation, and specialized forces. The success at Cabanatuan served as both a practical and symbolic demonstration that careful preparation, audacity, and disciplined execution could overcome formidable obstacles, shaping subsequent planning for raids and rescue operations across the Pacific. Historical records and post-war analyses reveal the meticulous debriefing that followed the raid. Every aspect was scrutinized: timing, movement, environmental factors, and human responses were cataloged and evaluated to inform future operational doctrine. Lessons learned emphasize the value of exploiting predictable enemy behavior, integrating local knowledge, and coordinating complex operations with precision and adaptability. This analytical layer underscores the dual nature of the operation: immediate tactical success coupled with strategic learning that informed broader military practice. In examining the aftermath, the human cost is also apparent. While casualties among the prisoners and rescuers were minimal compared to potential projections, the psychological scars of captivity and the intensity of the operation lingered. Veterans of the raid recall vivid memories of the tense crawl through jungle undergrowth, the constant awareness of detection, and the emotional weight of guiding comrades to safety under extreme duress. These recollections serve as testimony to the enduring human dimension of warfare: courage, resilience, and the capacity for coordinated action in the face of overwhelming odds. The narrative of Cabanatuan therefore extends beyond the immediate event to encompass lessons about leadership strategy and human endurance. Japanese commanders had realized the limitations of over-reliance on routine discipline and numerical superiority. Allied forces had demonstrated the power of meticulous intelligence coordination with local actors and the psychological leverage of audacious operations. Prisoners experienced the transformative power of liberation executed with precision, restoring agency and hope in the aftermath of prolonged oppression. By the conclusion of the raid and the evacuation of all 500 prisoners, the broader implications became clear. Not only had the immediate mission achieved its objective with remarkable efficiency, but the psychological reverberations among enemy forces, the validation of joint operational doctrine, and the enduring narrative of courage and ingenuity solidified the raid's place in military history. Japanese forces, confronting their inability to prevent such a meticulously executed extraction, had to reckon with the sobering truth that superiority in numbers and equipment could be neutralized by intelligence, audacity, and human determination. And so the turn of events at Cabanatuan stands as a testament: strategic preparation, coordinated human effort, and unwavering courage can defy even the most insurmountable odds. The echoes of that night: 500 men liberated an enemy stunned, and a plan executed with near-perfect precision, continue to resonate as a case study in operational excellence, resilience, and the profound impact of audacity in the crucible of war. The Japanese commanders had realized in the starkest terms that history could be rewritten in a single night, when intelligence, courage, and human will converge against even the most formidable adversary. The sun had fully risen over the Philippine jungle, casting golden light through the canopy and illuminating the remnants of a night that had forever altered the course of 500 lives. The camp at Cabanatuan, once a fortress of despair, now lay silent. Its fences intact, yet symbolically breached; its towers unmanned, yet rendered impotent by the audacity and precision of those who had struck with decisive intent. As the liberated prisoners moved along the narrow trails towards safety, each footstep carried not just the weight of survival, but the collective testimony of human resilience. The jungle, which had hidden shadows and harbored threats, now seemed to exhale its dense foliage, parting to reveal a path carved by courage, coordination, and unyielding determination. Every man who emerged from the darkness experienced a moment of dissonance, relief intertwined with disbelief, elation tempered by exhaustion, hope tinged with the lingering shadow of trauma. They had been prisoners reduced to skeletal figures by starvation disease and the psychological erosion of confinement, yet in a matter of hours, orchestrated movements and relentless human ingenuity had restored agency autonomy and the promise of life beyond the barbed wire. For many, the tactile reality of freedom. The feel of unshackled limbs, the brush of grass beneath feet, the open sky above was overwhelming a sensory affirmation that the improbable had been realized. Behind the operation, the Rangers and guerrillas began their own reckoning. Months of meticulous planning, reconnaissance, and rehearsals had culminated in execution that surpassed expectation. They had navigated the perils of a hostile environment, synchronized movements with near-military precision, and leveraged every variable terrain timing, human stamina to transform statistical impossibility into operational success. The relief and elation of the prisoners mirrored their own sense of accomplishment, yet for officers like Lieutenant Colonel Mucci, there was an added layer of reflection. The raid was not merely a tactical success, but a profound demonstration of human coordination, resilience, and courage under conditions that defied predictability. The Japanese commanders faced a stark confrontation with reality. The meticulously maintained camp designed to crush will and prevent escape had been penetrated and neutralized without warning or apparent compromise to the rescuers. Their assumptions about discipline predictability and the obedience of both prisoners and subordinates had been exposed as vulnerabilities. In the post-raid assessments, disbelief gave way to reluctant acknowledgement. Intelligence, local knowledge, and daring execution had nullified conventional advantages. The failure was not one of courage or equipment, but of anticipation, flexibility, and the inability to foresee audacity applied with precision. Historians have reflected on the aftermath of Cabanatuan as a case study in the interplay between planning human will and environmental factors. The operation exemplified how detailed intelligence, rigorous rehearsal, and exploitation of predictable enemy behavior could overcome even formidable defenses. Beyond the immediate liberation, it reshaped doctrines for subsequent rescue missions, emphasized the strategic value of integrating local actors, and highlighted the psychological impact of audacious operations on adversaries. The legacy of that night endures not just in the personal histories of the survivors, but in the principles of modern military strategy, illustrating that preparation, adaptability, and courage can redefine what is possible. For the liberated men, the psychological echo of the raid would last a lifetime. Survivor accounts describe a blend of exhilaration and vertigo, the simultaneous relief of escape and the staggering realization of what had been endured. They had witnessed the lethal calculus of war, the precision of human planning, and the profound effect of collaboration under extreme duress. Each story recounted months of deprivation, subtle acts of defiance, and the synchronized efforts that allowed them to seize freedom. The collective memory of that night became a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a narrative that transcended the immediate tactical context to embody the essence of courage and perseverance. The jungle, once a theater of threat and concealment, had witnessed a transformation. Shadows that had previously harbored danger now receded, revealing paths toward hope and renewal. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, every ray of sunlight filtering through the canopy became symbolic markers of survival and liberation. The environment that had confined and endangered human life had, through the interplay of planning and human ingenuity, facilitated a passage to freedom. The camp itself, while physically unchanged, was rendered impotent in meaning, a stark reminder that human agency, when applied with audacity and coordination, can overturn even the most oppressive systems. Reflections on the event extend to the broader philosophical implications of war power and resilience. What if those 500 men had not been rescued? What if meticulous planning had faltered by even a fraction of a second? The operation underscores a principle both sobering and inspiring, that within extreme adversity, The confluence of intelligence, courage, and collective effort can produce outcomes that defy expectation. Each participant, prisoner, ranger, guerrilla, became an agent of possibility, challenging assumptions, reshaping realities, and leaving an indelible imprint on history. As the survivors moved further from the camp, crossing rivers, navigating jungle paths, and converging with Allied forces, the immediate relief of physical liberation gave way to the recognition of enduring impact. The raid became a narrative thread, connecting the personal experiences of prisoners with the strategic imperatives of war, the lessons of intelligence and preparation, and the enduring testament to the power of coordinated human action. Its resonance extended beyond tactical success to inform understanding of leadership, courage, and the capacity to achieve the extraordinary under conditions that most would deem impossible. The story of Cabanatuan closes not with finality, but with a contemplative echo, a reflection on the human capacity for resilience, the audacity of planning, and the transformative potential of courage applied collectively. Each life saved, each assumption overturned, each barrier breached contributes to a legacy that transcends the particulars of place and time. It invites consideration of the broader principles that govern human action in the face of adversity, ingenuity, collaboration, and unwavering determination. And as we leave the jungle behind, the liberated prisoners moving into safety and the stunned enemy reconciling with the reality of failure, one is left to ponder the enduring lesson of that night. What if audacity, intelligence, and courage always intersected in the crucible of human conflict? What possibilities might emerge, and how might history itself be rewritten in moments where human will challenges the constraints of circumstance? Next, we will explore how similar operations across the Pacific demonstrated that the fusion of planning, adaptability, and courage could repeatedly redefine the boundaries of the possible. 500 men vanished from the grasp of an empire. Japanese defenses shattered not by brute force, but by audacity, precision, and unyielding human will. The jungle exhaled silence, replacing months of terror, and the impossible had been achieved. Every step beyond the barbed wire was a heartbeat of freedom, a triumph of coordination over cruelty, courage over despair, intelligence over routine. History paused and etched their actions into memory. As dawn broke over the Philippine horizon, one truth remained. Even the most impregnable fortress can fall when audacity moves faster than fear. What comes next, when human ingenuity confronts even greater challenges, remains unwritten.